The subcommittee will come to order, and good afternoon to everybody. The global incidence of autism is steadily increasing. About 1 in 68 children have been identified with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, according to estimates from the Centers for Disease Control, Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network. ASD is reported to occur in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups, but is almost 5 times more common among boys, 1 in 42, than among girls, 1 in 189. Studies in Asia, Europe, and North America have identified individuals with ASD with an average of about 1% of the population. The prevalence of autism in Africa is unknown, but there is no reason to believe that it's any different, it might even be worse, than other parts of the world. I note parenthetically that Greg Simpkins and I were in Nigeria twice in the last year, but 10 years ago for a conference on combating sex trafficking, and something I've worked on for many, many years. And after the speech, a man came up and said, "What are you doing about autism in Nigeria?" And I said, "Well, nothing." We've become good friends ever since. He has worked with the Autism Society of America ever since to grow, and he said there's at least 1 million children in Nigeria who are dealing, it's probably closer to 2, and not dealing with it well because they are so resource lacking. A new study recently found that each case of autism costs $2.4 million over a lifetime, including the expense of special education and lost productivity for their parents. Meanwhile, 85% of autistic adults are jobless or underemployed. It is therefore imperative that people with ASD are empowered to be self-sufficient so that they can not only earn money to meet their own needs, but they also can utilize their very special talents that they possess to contribute to society at large. This hearing will examine some innovative strategies to achieve that important goal. SAP, a global software company, is working to rectify this problem. SAP partnered with Thorkel Sohn, CEO and founder of Special Listern, to develop the highly successful SAP Autism at Work program. Mr. Sohn, whose 17-year-old son Lars is autistic, realized that while those with autism might lack the social skills recruiters are looking for, they possess many attributes high on their radar as well: intelligence and memory, the ability to see patterns and attention to detail, especially on repetitive tasks. He reasoned that it would be phenomenal if we could use skills like that we see among the autism community in software testing, data analysis, and quality controls. He says that there is no reason why we should leave these people unemployed when they have so much talent and there's so many vacant jobs in the high-tech sector. SAP and Mr. Sohn will provide further details of their extraordinary program here today. Teresa Hussman of Autism Society put it, I think, very well. In work, at school, and in the community, people with autism are often faced with segregation, low expectations, impoverished conditions, and denial of opportunity that a society committed to civil rights should find unacceptable. Today, if you are an adult living with autism, you will likely be unemployed or vastly underemployed, living well below the poverty line, and denied access to affordable housing and so much more. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ron Susskind will testify in part about the success with his affinity approach. And he points out in his testimony that for every visible deficit, there is an equal and opposing strength. This population is just like the rest of us, only less so and more so. The question increasingly is not if these more so qualities exist, but where. Autism used to be described as a disorder characterized by delays or abnormal functioning to the age of 3, in social interaction, communication or restricted, repetitive and stereotyped patterns of behavior, interests, and activities. More recently, behavioral scientists describe a range of such behavior, now referred to as autism spectrum disorder, which includes more high-functioning version known as Asperger's syndrome. It is medically possible to diagnose somebody with ASD as early as 18 months or even younger, and a reliable diagnosis can be made by the age of 2. However, symptoms might not present themselves until later in life. Those with some form of autism may never be diagnosed at all. This has led to a debate over famous people, productive people, often considered geniuses, who appear to have symptoms of autism, especially Asperger's syndrome. In April 3rd, 2003 issue of the New Scientist magazine, writer Hazel Muir revealed the debate over whether geniuses like Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton had Asperger syndrome. Simon Baron Cohen, an autism expert based at Cambridge and Oxford University, mathematician Ian James, speculated that Newton, the noted English physicist and mathematician, exhibited Asperger traits such as hardly speaking, forgetting to eat, and giving scheduled lectures even to an empty room. Einstein, the German physicist, who was said to have obsessively repeated sentences until he was 7 years old and was notoriously confusing as a lecturer. Both were highly productive scientists, perhaps because of the kind of focus ASD produces rather than in spite of it. In February 2nd of 2005, a report by Sue Herrera of CNBC presented an interview with 2002 Nobel laureate Vernon L. Smith, in which he spoke of the way in which autism has allowed him to excel. "I can switch out and go into a concentrated mode, and the world is completely shut out," Smith is quoted as saying. "If I'm writing something, nothing else exists." During the interview, Smith, who won the Nobel Prize for inventing the field of experimental economics, admitted that he sometimes is not there in social situations. He said that teaching had forced him to become more social. It was only because he was talking about issues on which he was already focused. I raise the issue of intelligence and functionality because we too often see people with ASD as victims who must be cared for when the focus their condition produces may only allow them to be highly successful in certain endeavors. When we begin to look at people with ASD in this light, we can better see how they can be enabled to contribute to society. It just requires understanding of their potential as well as their limitations. Many fields involving mathematics and science would allow for the intense focus exhibited by people with ASD. Think of the fields of analysis, intelligence, actuary science, and the positions requiring what we commonly call numbers crunching. The ability to analyze data and see patterns most people would not recognize would be an invaluable analytical in those jobs. As Nobel laureate Smith, Vernon Smith continued, his disconnection from social relationships enabled him to think outside the box, as it were, without concern for violating social norms. He found this condition to be an advantage in enabling greater creativity. In our increasingly technical world, people with ASD actually are becoming more valuable if we can help them overcome social disconnection and allow them to find fields in which they can bring where their disability is actually an advantage. We hope today's hearing can be instructive in at least initiating a change in perspective on what people with ASD can do to help themselves and make a contribution to society as a whole. We must not continue to waste the talents of people who could make their lives and ours much better. Finally, I'd like to welcome an amazing group of individuals who have and are making an historic difference in the lives of people on the spectrum. As Michael Rosenoff of Autism Speaks puts it in his testimony, our mission at Autism Speaks is to change the future for all who struggle with autism spectrum disorders. Each of you on this expert panel are already doing that, and I thank you as chair of this subcommittee.